Welcome, everybody, to our webinar on how to boost your immune system in 21 days. You could also say it's our Bulletproof Your Immune System webinar. And I love that because really, I mean, what it means is it's not just about taking a shot, but bulletproofing you from that if you do get hit. So, and it also means that you never get hit. It means we're going to be living in our environment, in our community, in our world. And so we're going to be exposed to all kinds of things. But the thing I want you to learn tonight is, well, what can you do so that when you are exposed, you actually recover and you have a great outcome? So that's what I'm thinking about here for us tonight. So we're going to jump right in here. And let's see if that's going to, there we go. I love this Phoenix emblem here, this image, because it's really this idea that we really can come from a place of feeling like, I don't know if I ever could have a strong immune system, and we can burst into really having a robust immune system. It's possible. And I want to share with you my story when I first had my first experience as a 13-year-old. Let me share that one. When I was 13 years old, my dad changed careers and went off to become a chiropractor. And he came back on his first vacation, and I had strep throat. Now, before he got back, my mom had taken me to the pediatrician, and he looked at my mouth and wrote out the script, right? And he comes back with the medic. Well, my mom comes back with the medication, and I could hardly swallow anything. It was so painful. So when she shows me this pill that I'm pretty sure at 13, I remember it was probably about that big, I was not going to take it. So I didn't take it. And I don't know if any of you ever remember having strep throat and how painful it can be, but that's what it was like. And so I couldn't take it. And so when my dad came home, I hadn't taken any of the medication. And he said, we should check your spine and nervous system. And I said, okay, Dad. And then he gave me my first chiropractic adjustment. And wow, what was that? Is what I'm thinking. And then after that, within 20 or 30 minutes, I could swallow more easily. And I asked my dad, like, how does this work? And he said, we just need to turn the power back on. So I said, okay, 13 years old, that made sense. But it also set me on a new trajectory because I was fascinated with everything to do with chiropractic and with natural healing. And over all these decades, nothing's changed since then. So I've been studying natural healing for all these decades, and I want to share with you what I've learned and distill it down into this particular topic of the immune system. And, that may be a fascinating story to some of you, but it is more than that to me because it was really a pivot point in my life. And now I can see how it has played out even in my daughter. So it's generational at this point. And so from that experience, very early on, I was able to envision a world where the natural state is extraordinary health. And that's what I see for the people I encounter, that they have that potential as well. And so we have to just take steps, and they have to be action steps if we're going to get there. So I'm glad all of you are joining us, and we either on the recording or live. And really, this is going to be about taking action steps. So I do want you to stay focused on what we're covering tonight so that you know exactly what you need to do so you can get yourself on a new trajectory as well. I want to just recognize that one of the things that happens is people are very afraid of contagious things these days, more so than ever before. And people have always been asking age-old questions. How do I stay healthy? How do I minimize the chances of getting sick? How do I minimize the chances of being hit by a virus or killed by a virus? How do I minimize the chances of having to take drugs or surgery? And so these questions have been the same for ages and ages. But nowadays, the answers are different. And you are different now. Our culture is different now. We have to address this in very specific ways. And that's what I'm going to share with you this evening. So, and meanwhile, in our culture, asking those questions, the media, mainstream media, they just keep answering those same old questions in the same old answers instead of the new answers. And it stirs up so much fear and uncertainty in folks. So let's take the time tonight to really unpack this so that you can be more certain about the best choices to make for you and your family. So here's the thing, everyone is focused on the strength of the virus instead of being focused on the strength of the host. And if we focus on our own body's strength and how to strengthen our own immune system, then that's when we're going to see the changes. So rather than just being afraid of the strength of the virus, which there's nothing we can do about that, we should focus our energy on how do we strengthen ourselves, strengthen the host. We used to be the super species on the planet. I mean, if you think of all the different species, they kind of found their niche, they found their habitat, they found how they should live, and then they stayed in that habitat and they stayed in that environment and that ecology for them to be healthy and thrive. And if they went outside of that, they were not going to do well. But humans learned how to thrive in almost every environment. So we really became the super species on the planet that we could go anywhere. And so we used to be this super species, but now we are the sickest species on the planet. The problem is that we're acting as though we are superhuman. We're still acting that way. And it's getting us into trouble because we were born superheroes, but we've become weak. And so I want to explain this, that the problem is not that we have a badass virus that's come to town. It's different from anything we've ever seen, and it keeps having variations to it. That's not what the problem is. The problem is that we are no longer the badasses that we were designed to be. And we have it within us to actually fight anything, even a new thing. It's already in us. So we need to change the conversation. And so any healthcare, anybody that studies healthcare, we're all going to agree on this, that the health equation comes from genetics as one factor, the environment as another factor, and our lifestyle choices as another factor. And they all are there's a confluence between these three that then determines what the outcome is going to be. And all this is happening over time. So when we think of gene expression, there's two things that will determine how genes will express: the environment and lifestyle. And so the environment is going to be, the air you breathe, the family you're born into. There are some things that we can't change. You can't hold your breath when you go outside if you live in LA, right? So there are some things that we don't have control over. But our lifestyle, we have complete control over 100%. And so that's where we like to put all of our energy, is to making changes there. And so even if I've studied genetics over the years that I have, the one thing that still remains true is that 99.6% of us have the perfect genome to express perfect health as long as we have the right environment over time. That's what we have learned from genetics up to this point. So many times people will even blame that their, current health situation is, oh, it must be from bad genes or bad germs or bad luck. But it's not. What you're going to learn tonight is from bad behavior. It's what we're doing that is causing the weaknesses. So I want you to focus on the importance of making sure that your body, the intelligence of your body, that your genes get the proper inputs so they can express the health that you need. And your genes are great. They just need the proper ingredients. So just know you have got the great blueprint that you have and that you want to have. You already have it. You just need the proper building materials, and you've got to have a great recipe. And then you're going to get the outcomes that you want. So I know some people say, no, you don't understand, doc. My family, diabetes, it runs in my family. And I say, yeah, the problem is not that diabetes runs in your family. The problem is that nobody runs in your family. So it's really about what you do. And we're going to look at that in detail tonight. But first, let's just understand this idea of genetics and how that plays out versus environment and lifestyle. This is looking at the obesity trends amongst girls and boys. Now, I just want you to notice here that it just goes up, both girls and boys, over the years from 1980. Look at this spiral. And this is 2010, it's going towards 2020, 2026, where we are right now, but the trajectory has not changed just because you can't see it on the graph. This trend has continued, and it's just showing the different countries of where it is, but it's continued all over the world, but especially in some certain areas. But the thing is that geneticists tell us that the human genome has been nearly unchanged in the last 60,000 years. So for 3,700 generations of humans, that's your ancestors. We are all descended from 3,700 generations of successful human beings to get to where we are. And so this obesity trending has been since 1985. So that can't be from genes. But the next generation is getting there faster, and it has devastating implications. They also found that obesity is linked to severe coronavirus disease back in the day, back a few years ago. They found that out pretty quickly, actually. That study actually found that obesity was linked to chronic disease, even with swine flu or any H1N1 flu. Even as early as 2009, we knew that people that were obese did not do as well when they were exposed to contagious illnesses. And so, in one study from China, even with COVID, they found that 88% of the patients that died were obese. And that included even younger patients as well. And so we know that that is a part of this puzzle here is that in America, we have such a high level of obesity. In fact, oh, well, yeah, I already talked about that study from China. Here we go. So this is an interesting study that just looked at the obesity rates for the America. And you can see we are 12th on this list. But look who's in front of us, these tiny little islands. We are number one when it comes to just the major nations on the planet, the bigger nations. And yet we spend more on healthcare than any other nation in the world. And so the other studies here showed that, again, obesity was the single biggest chronic factor in all the people that were hospitalized with COVID. And so it was really about how those people had been living up to that point that had already made them vulnerable. So it's time to have a real discussion about the overall health of Americans. And when we look at what the studies show us, it tells us that people actually have never been sicker, and that obesity is the linchpin to chronic disease. And 88% of our $2.6 trillion that we're spending on healthcare, that is related to obesity. 86% is related to obesity. And that's a lifestyle disease. And so this was a study that really was disturbing to me. It came out in 2009. It's maybe the most disturbed I've ever been by looking at data. And it was from the CDC, and they found that any child born after the year 2000 may not be expected to live as long as their parents, that we were losing ground in healthy longevity. And this other study, the prevalence of chronic disease in the US, is just going up and up and up. And so I know sometimes when you look at data, anybody's eyes start to glaze over, but let's get real about this. I mean, if we think about this trend right here, think of who you know that has children. Maybe you have a niece or a nephew, or your own child, or a grandchild, or a neighbor's child. Is it okay with you if they don't have the benefit of the healthy longevity that we were designed for? So these numbers come from real people. And so maybe somebody you know right now is struggling with their immune system health. A friend, a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, or maybe you are struggling or concerned. And so let's just make it real so that we stay focused on what do we need to do about this. Because we were born superheroes, but we have become weak. The problem, again, is not that the viruses are getting stronger or different. It's that we are already weak. So let's take a look at this idea that we have superpowers that are all that we need for our immune system to work. And just take a look at where they're all coming from. So you have an innate intelligence that is part of your design, and it's designed to actually have you be able to access these superpowers. So the first one is breast milk. And remember that any of these superpowers, you were born with them. You did not earn them. You did not train for them. You didn't have to work for them. You were just born with them. And I love this one, breast milk, because it relates right to birth itself. And so babies are born and immediately they have access to this amazing food, breast milk. But what's interesting about it is that as that baby is nursing, it actually is programming the mother's milk to deliver exactly what that baby needs at that moment in time. And if that baby actually is having some challenge for their immune system, they actually will program that mother's milk to deliver the exact antibodies that they need so that they can protect them. And this is an example of it. This is breast milk that's been pumped. And on the left side, this is a woman that pumped her breast and her baby was fine. And then that night, the baby started to get a fever and the baby was nursing through the night. And the next day, when she pumped her milk, look at the change in this breast milk, how rich it is with everything that baby needs that very day in order to support it until it has that healthy, robust immune system that it can and will build. So, breast milk is about communication, delivering the exact nutrients and immune system needs that that baby has. We didn't even know this 5 years ago, right? This is a superpower that we have. What else? The gut wall. It's a superpower. We were actually born where our gut wall is designed to be permeable until we're about 2 years old. And after that, if it's permeable, we call that leaky gut. But a baby is supposed to have it permeable so that that breast milk can get in and can flood the whole system so that all of that support for the immune system that baby is still building, it's going to come from the breast milk. And it can get all the way, all the benefits of it can get all the way through into the body, even up into the brain. The blood-brain barrier in children and infants is also leaky purposefully. It was designed to be that way. And that gets that breast milk into the body. It jumpstarts the immune system. And then after they're 2 years old, we start to get the tight junctions that develop, and children's teeth will break through so they're ready to eat on their own. And so that is a superpower that we have, our gut wall. Because after that, if it's strong, then things that go into our mouth that should not go into our bodies, they just stay in that tube and they go all the way through if we have a healthy gut wall. What about T killer cells? They specifically are there to find and kill cancer. It's a superpower that we have. What about fever? Fever heats up our bodies to kill off pathogens, but we survive. It's designed that way. And in fact, some people have a little bit of a fear of a fever, and they're afraid of their children having high fevers. And some are afraid that it's going to damage their brain if the fever gets too high. Well, it turns out that it's impossible for a human body to create its own fever that is high enough to actually cause damage. Now, there can be high fevers that can trigger seizures, febrile seizures, and those are scary, but they're not necessarily damaging the brain. If the baby gets dehydrated, that could be damaging. So the fever, you want to keep that baby hydrated. But as far as the body creating its own high fever, no, it won't do that. It won't do that in a way that'll damage. Now, if a baby was left in a hot car on a summer day and their body temperature went up because of that, yeah, that could be damaging. But as far as the body creating its own increase in heat, and there's a purpose why we have a fever. It turns out that that higher temperature increases the frequency of the cells vibrating, and it actually allows the bone cells to liberate calcium more when we have a fever because our immune system needs calcium when we are exercising it. And so When we have enough calcium release, then the fever goes down. If you actually give people calcium lactate when they have a fever, it's not artificially taking that fever down. It's just providing what the body needs so it doesn't need to keep jacking up the heat. That's a superpower. Vomiting is awesome. It's our body identifying a toxin and getting it out as fast as possible. And I say etc. because there's a part two to that process where if it gets past the place of the stomach and gets into the intestine, then we're going to get rid of it as fast as possible as well. Now, it's awesome. It's not necessarily convenient, and it's definitely not comfortable. But who promised that healing was going to have to be comfortable? We were designed to struggle as well. We're designed to have our immune systems challenged and then responding. And that actually builds a healthy immune system. There's a phrase that informed pediatricians use, which is 103 by 3. I don't know if any of you have heard that phrase, 103 by 3. And it means that every child, by the time they're 3 years old, must experience 103-degree fever or higher in order to trigger the immune system to marry up with the neurological system so their neuroimmune system becomes efficient for the rest of their life. It is a window of development that they have to meet. And bless their hearts, well-meaning parents, they've been misled to be afraid of these high fevers, and they keep trying to take them down, and they're robbing their children of this opportunity to actually exercise their immune system the way it was designed to. All right. And so, what are the implications of us getting weak? The world shut down is what happened, right? Just stay home, wash your hands, right? No hugging, no group, no meeting in groups, right? Is that the best that we've got? The world shut down, hard stop, period. Not just a town or a state, the world did. And it shut down because a segment of our population was vulnerable. We were trying to protect a segment that was weak. So it's time to change the conversation. Stop focusing on the strength of the virus and start focusing on the strength of the host. Because there are going to be more badass viruses that come to town. And so we need to be badass. You need to be badass so that you are equipped to deal with it. So now it's time to focus on getting you stronger. So next time you encounter something, you won't be the weak one. So who's with me here? So how did we get so weak? How did that happen? The research tells us that personal responsibility is one of the number one reasons. Who is actually in charge of you? Who's responsible for your health? Is it your doctor? Is it your spouse? Is it your mom? Right? My mom takes care of me. Yeah. Is it your insurance carrier? I hope not, because they do not. Their bottom line is to support their stakeholders, not about your health. So, is it the government? Is the government's job for you how healthy you're going to be, or is it you? Personal responsibility. And the sooner that we get that, the sooner we get to have robust immune systems of just taking it on ourselves. Reason 3, I'm going to tell you later. I have more I want to unpack here. The second reason is we have lowered our expectations of health. We have normalized weak immune systems and chronic disease. We've even changed the definition of health. People think of health like it's a simple toggle switch between being healthy and being sick. Oh, I was sick on Monday and Tuesday, and then I was healthy on Wednesday, because they're basing on how they feel. I felt sick on Monday. I felt sick on Tuesday, not as much. I was better, but then Wednesday is when I was healthy again. The reality is this: most people spend most of their lives in the not sick zone, which is different from healthy. It's when it's undiagnosed and asymptomatic, when we don't have that robust level of function, but we're not sick, but we're not healthy. So unfortunately, people spend their life toggling between sick and not sick, but they're calling not sick healthy. So they've been misled. And the difference, and there is a difference between sick and not sick, sick and diagnosed and sick and undiagnosed, or sick and symptomatic and sick and asymptomatic. And there is a difference between not sick and healthy. So we need a better definition for health than just not sick. We've been using the wrong definition of healthy. And so many people think that sick is the opposite of health, but actually, sick is the absence of health. And if I can think of an analogy, it's the idea of light and dark. So, what is light? Light is a thing. And what is darkness? Darkness is not a thing. It's the absence of a thing. So darkness is the absence of light. So if you don't like the darkness that you have, what do you need to do? You need to add light. Well, here it is. If you don't like the sickness that you have or the weakness that you have, what do you need to do? You need to add health. And that's what I want to cover. And I also want to just say that symptoms are not bad. They have a place and they tell us where we are and which direction we're going. So if we look at the illness wellness continuum here, at the right side, we have this high level wellness, robust health. At the left side, we have premature death, early death. In the middle is the neutral point. That's the not sick zone. No discernible illness or wellness, but it's not the same as robust health. And as you leave that neutral point and travel to the left, first there will be signs that you're losing function. And if we were able to measure those signs, we would see it, but you may not feel anything yet. And then as function deteriorates, we start to get the symptoms. And those symptoms are your body's message to you, telling you you are moving away from health right now, and it's time to make a change. And if you don't make a change, or if you have the answer to your question of, how do I deal with this sickness that I have? If the answer is we've got a pill for that, you may actually feel better, but it may not be improving your function. So you may actually be getting worse, even though you're feeling better. You may be back in the not sick zone, except that this time that no symptoms, you're further down in function. And when you get to the point where you actually have a disability, that means the symptoms, you can no longer fix them. And you can see you've lost a lot of function. So let's just recognize that this is a better way to think about how your health works. And we are all on this health continuum. So ask yourself, where are you right now? And just mentally place a mark where you are right now. This represents the potential spectrum of health of where you could be. And health is dynamic, it's fluid, it's always changing, it's never static. So everybody that has placed themselves wherever they are right now, you're still moving. And you're either going to be moving towards health or away from it. So which way are you moving right now? Just mentally put an arrow above your mark of where you are and which way you're moving. And then just recognize that everybody has a velocity of how fast they're moving in that direction. And there is a momentum to that as well. And so right now, you're only as healthy as everybody around you, as your family, as your lifestyle. And families have followed similar lifestyles. And so, if you have a spouse, where do you want your spouse to be on this continuum? Or if you have kids, where do you want your kids to be on this continuum? Or if you do have kids, ask them, where do they want you to be on this continuum? And which way do you want to be moving? So what do you think your kids and your spouse would tell you? The same thing that you are thinking for them. So let's talk about now the difference between contagious and dangerous. And the dangerous is to the immunocompromised. So contagiousness means, anybody might be exposed, but dangerous means the only ones that are going to have a compromise are those that are immunocompromised. And so what you should be asking yourself is, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm not immunocompromised so that I am immune competent? What do I need to start doing or stop doing to reduce my risk? And we want to shift our focus from the strength of the virus to the strength of the host. So, what does it mean? How does it present? How does it show up? Who are the immunocompromised? Well, here are some examples. People that have genetic disorders, yes, there's a very small segment of the population, and it's like 0.01%, something like that. It's very, very tiny, where they literally have a genetic compromise, a genetic disorder, something like cystic fibrosis, for example, where that's genetically based and it affects your lungs. But I will tell you, I even know people through COVID that had cystic fibrosis that actually had COVID that survived it. They got through it. So it doesn't mean it's a death sentence just because you have a genetic disorder. What else? Pre-existing conditions. So again, we have to ask, well, what led up to those pre-existing conditions? And there's a lot of things we can do about those things to get people healthier. People that are undergoing certain treatments like chemotherapy that are specifically designed to suppress the immune system. And then oftentimes we will put the elderly in this category as well as who may be immunocompromised. But I will tell you that it's not that the elderly in and of itself, age in and of itself, is not a determinant that automatically puts you into the category of immunocompromised. In fact, the people that are most at risk who are the elderly, it's because they have spent the last 30 or 40 years living in a genetically incongruent lifestyle. And it has a compounding effect that is then leads to compounded sickness. So it's not age in and of itself that is the problem. We wouldn't say the elderly in and of themselves must be immunocompromised just by definition. No, it's what their lifestyle habits have been as they have been aging. So here's the truth. You don't get sick, you do sick. So a lot of times people think the best strategy is just try to avoid the germs. But let me just unpack this idea for you here. So you see these acorns on the screen here. What do acorns become? Would you all agree they become oak trees? Like every time. It's not going to be an elm tree or a maple tree. It's going to be an oak tree. But is it really every time an acorn is going to become an oak tree? Like if I took those acorns and I tossed them into the corner of the room, how long is it going to take for that to become a tree? So there's something that would be missing, right? Soil, rain, sun, the environment is what's going to determine whether that acorn can even become the potential of that tree that it has within it. So the seed is the opportunist that's looking for the right environment. The seed is the potential. And so the idea to avoid the virus and the germs, you can't avoid them. They're everywhere. And it's not just this season. We're exposed to influenza viruses all year round. So why is it that this is the time of the year when people are calling it the flu season? It's because of what we're doing, because people do sick this time of the year. We just came out of the holidays when people were think about all those holiday habits that we have in our culture, not getting enough sleep, eating more of the unhealthy foods, more sugar, more stress. And so that's really what's happening. Germs are everywhere. If you looked at your spouse's mouth under a microscope, you'd see so many germs, you may not ever want to kiss them again. But it's actually designed that way. We actually have 10 to the 15th different viruses in our body right now. 10 to the 15th. That's 10 with 15 zeros after it. So we don't want to spend our energy trying to avoid germs when we could be spending our energy not becoming the soil for them. So not becoming the weak environment that they can take advantage of for the potential that they have. And so when we look at this illness wellness continuum and we look at stronger on the robust healthy side and weaker on the symptomatic and losing function side, it really is looking at immunocompromised and immunocompetent. And so I'm going to be sharing again the 5 areas for you to focus on so that and four of them will impact your health, but five of them, but the fifth one is the cornerstone. And so we're going to look at that because that's the one that controls everything. So everybody know what kryptonite is here. If you have superpowers, you know that Superman, kryptonite was basically stress. What does kryptonite do to Superman? Kryptonite is the same as stress. And so bad lifestyle choices are what creates stress for us. So would everybody agree that stress can affect your health? And what are those bad lifestyle choices? Bad diet, sedentary lifestyle. So stress is like kryptonite to your superpowers, to your immune system. It's what creates immunocompromise. So let's look at what happens when we're stressed. So we literally, when we're stressed, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, our muscle tone goes up. Digestion slows down because we want to put all of our resources into fighting that tiger and surviving the next minute. Reproduction is going to slow down. Not a good time to make babies if a tiger's standing right there. Serotonin levels also go down. Not a good time to relax and sleep, right? Sensory systems are up, so we're hyper aware. Fear and anxiety are up because it's helping to fuel this energy we need to survive that next minute. Insulin sensitivity is going to be down-regulated because we want higher blood sugar so that we can get that blood sugar right out through the bloodstream into the muscles where we need it. We're going to have a flip of the LDLs and HDLs. So we have less HDL, which moves cholesterol out of the blood, and higher LDLs, which moves cholesterol into the bloodstream so that it can be delivered because cholesterol also going up. It is what we use to repair wounds. It's required to repair tissues. So we want that available. And that's why the clotting factors also go up when we're stressed. Now, the immune response actually will go down when we're stressed because the immune system is a very expensive system to run. It's very energy intensive. And so we need all that energy right this minute to survive the next minute. Who cares about having long-term immune function if you don't survive the next minute? And the idea is that as soon as we're done this minute, then we'll put the resources back into immune system for healing up those injuries and so on, fighting off any infections that might come about. But in survive the next minute, we don't want to waste our energy there. We need it for everything else. And so this is an adaptive physiology, and it's what we call a sympathetic state, high sympathetic. So we have two parts of the nervous system, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. But we also call this a sympathetic state. All right. And so when you think of all the stresses we're exposed to, they come at us from three dimensions. So not only is it just about, the worries that you have, and we can have some big stresses in our life that are worries. Loss of a job, loss of a spouse or a loved one, loss of a home. Like there can be some big events that occur that are stressful thought, mental, emotional. But then in between those big events, we have bad habits, poor posture even. We have chaos, we have disorganization, we have deadlines. That's also in that thought realm of stresses. And then there are toxins. Now, one off in your life, you might be exposed to a poison or a toxin, but in between any of those just sporadic events of exposure to poisons, we also have what our agricultural and food industry has done in the last few decades that has just devastated the health of our children and ourselves. And so our modern life is so unnaturally stressful. When we think of traumas, yes, we have traumas like accidents, sports injuries, car accidents, but in between those events, we have sedentary lifestyle. And that's as much part of the modern life that is so unnaturally stressful as well. So we know that stress can make us sick, and it comes at us in those three dimensions. Now, during COVID, think about, and this is a very interesting study here. I want to tell you about this. So this is crazy. What they found is they actually, this was in the 1990s when they did this study, and they found that they could drip. They had these volunteers, like people actually volunteer for this, and they literally dripped into their noses coronavirus and adenovirus and rhinovirus and all different viruses that should produce a cold. And people literally lined up so they could be a participant. But here's what was fascinating. They literally dripped it into their noses, but not everyone got sick. Yep. Even when it was put directly into their nose. And it turned out that the more stress you had in your life, the more likely you were to get sick. Well, no surprise there. Psychological stress was a better predictor of sickness than any other lifestyle factor, including smoking, alcohol consumption, exercise, diet, and even sleep. Try doing that that study again today. You wouldn't get any volunteers. Up to 25% did not even get sick when the virus was stuffed up their nose. Now, frontline health workers may have been some of the most stressed people in the last 5, 6 years. And when COVID hit, and I recognized that we need to keep our frontline health workers strong because they were right there. And so I actually offered to take care of them at no charge. Let's just keep everybody healthy. So that was the way I could do my part. Annie was a nurse that was struggling with anxiety. And can you imagine if you already were struggling with anxiety and then, you're encountering this situation? And so she got under care. And I remember it was after maybe a month or so, she started to come in. She says, I don't get it. I am not experiencing this anxiety anymore. Even in this situation, she didn't have the anxiety. Now, Tammy was a nurse and she was having back pain, but she had to transfer patients and they were understaffed and she was working so hard. So for her, yeah, we were able to help her with her back pain so she could do her job. Lori was having neck pain, and it was because she was a phlebotomist and she always was in these awkward postures, but had to do physical distancing and had all that PPE equipment on. And it was just so awkward to try and do the job that she had that it was aggravating her neck. And so, yeah, those are people that we took care of because they were the most stressed people at that time. So the mindset that we want to stop doing, we're going to now talk about what do we need to stop doing and what do we need to start doing in each of these categories of how you eat, how you move, how you think. So how you think. Limited thinking is what can actually create stress for us. And so in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1991, there was a study called the Cohen study, and it came out of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And what they did was they took 394 humans, and this is the one where they had dripped the viruses into their noses, and they had that experience of many of them had no symptoms at all. But what they did have was they were worrying about the future or they were regretting the past. That was what they were looking at. So people that actually were doing more worrying about the future and regretting the past. And the other thing they found was people that were judging also, if they were very judgmental people, that actually interfered with the immune system function. There's a great book by Bruce Lipton. It's called The Biology of Belief. And he actually looked at how cells change based on our thoughts and cell membranes, how the cell membranes literally change based on our thoughts. So we need to really look at how are we limiting our own thinking? What are we worrying about? Are we holding grudges? Are we having regrets from the past? And how do we change those? So we're gonna go across the ideas here. Of course, each one of these could be entire webinars in and of themselves, but you can find your resources for that. And if you don't know resources, again, reach out to us and we're happy to pass things on to you. So what do we need to start doing? We need to start vision casting. We need to start living in alignment. So we have to use our brains to actually direct our thoughts. If we have limited thinking, we need to change it. And it's really amazing that humans have this part of our brain that's called the prefrontal cortex. It's where our humanity lives, but we're the only species that can actually change our thoughts that can then change our chemistry in our body. So just like think about what are your thoughts that you have that you can go to where you have a vision of yourself being healthy, or you have a vision of a safe place for you, or just a vision of you being on a beach somewhere, or a great experience that you had, and just direct yourself in that direction. Being in alignment with your values. So if you're in situations or around people that contradict what your values are, that's going to be more stressful. So find ways to actually live in alignment with your values. And then gratitude. And gratitude was the fastest way to turn the stress switch off in studies where they put electrodes on their brains. They showed them stressful images. As soon as they went to gratitude, that was the fastest thing that would turn that stress switch off. So when you're vision casting, if you can think about things that you're grateful for, that is the fastest way to turn the stress switch off. And there's a chiropractor, a thought leader that I learned from, and he said we should learn to be equanimous. And basically, he said, if whatever you're stressed about, if you can actually think about what you're grateful for in that very thing, that was one of the most powerful sources and forces of gratitude that really shifted the whole biology of the body. And Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, he talks about that too. Joe Dispenza is well known on how we can change our bodies by our vision casting and our thoughts. Louise Hay is an age-old resource for changing your thoughts with affirmations. Byron Katie, she has a book called Loving What Is that she wrote. It's all about like just asking yourself 4 different questions, and within a few minutes you can just shift your stress levels. I find EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique, is another tool that we can use to turn the stress switch off. And Dr. DeMartini, the chiropractor I learned from, equilibration is the word he uses. Find the good in whatever you're stressed about, find the gratitude. All right. And then if we look at sleep. So again, lifestyle choices, sleeping. We're the only species on the planet that voluntarily does not get enough sleep. No other species does that. If they're being chased, okay, they might not get enough sleep, but other than that, they're going to find that they get the sleep that they need. So when we think of what do we need to stop doing around sleep, we need to stop being stimulated by blue light that comes from screens. And not only that, the content of what we're worried about or what we're concerned about, that can also come through. But the blue light itself actually disturbs the melatonin production, and it can actually interfere with sleep. And so something called sleep procrastination, like I should be getting to bed, but I just want to finish this project, right? So we procrastinate on getting to sleep on time. So those things are crucial for having a strong immune system. My daughter told me recently that she really thought that when she started to get sick, she just needed to sleep her way out of it and just get really great sleep. And it has a big impact. And then if you're feeling stress and that's interfering with your sleep, there's a tool I use. It's called my 421 protocol. And 421 means that I'm going to first think about 4 things that that I'm grateful for. And I think of the first one and then the second one. And sometimes I have my standbys that I always go to. And sometimes I think about just this very day, what am I grateful for? Once I've gone through those 4, if I'm not already asleep, then I go to the 2 things that I love. And it might be my family, or it might be my bed that's so comfortable right then and there. I just love my bed, or whatever it is, 2 things that you love. And then the last thing, the one, is something that I could use some help with right now. And I just offer it up. So the 421 protocol. And then also recognize that alcohol Sometimes people try to use alcohol to help them sleep, but it actually will disturb the deep sleep. So you won't get as restful sleep. So try not to use alcohol as a way to get good sleep. What should we start doing? We want to start making sure we're heading for 8 hours of sleep. Humans need 8 hours of sleep. Sometimes 9 hours can be useful. And if you are a teenager, 10 hours is actually probably the appropriate amount of sleep for a teenager. And for children as well, lots of sleep. If you're older, sometimes they say now 7.5 hours is still good enough, but you definitely want more than 7 hours of sleep. Everybody does. And then think about the sleep surface that you're sleeping on. People ask me about what pillows I should use, what beds I should use. So we have pillows that support the spine. We also different beds. I love the Sleep Number beds because you can change the tension in the bed so it's softer or more firm. And sometimes in life you want to make some changes there so you don't always have the same. So I've had a Sleep Number bed for over 30 years. And I just have to change a few things every few years that get a little soft as far as the baffles, but it's $50 investment for every few years. So those are great. Sleep Number beds, Select Comfort. I love those beds. And there are other good ones out there as well, just sharing what I have. Diet style, how you eat, how you move, how you think. So what do we need to stop doing around our diet? We want to stop eating toxic foods. So just recognize that processed foods will contain some sort of toxin in them if they're processed. So we want to get real foods. Real foods are the way to go, but we want to stop the toxic foods. Anytime that we have concerns about our health, it's always going to be because something's interfering with the natural design of being healthy. And there's always only two things that can interfere, toxicities or deficiencies or both. And so toxicities with diet style, they come in the form of toxic foods. So the additives, the preservatives, sugar also needs to be addressed. Sugar, it takes 5 to 12 hours and it will tank the immune system for that length of time. So just I think it's just a little bit like a teaspoon of sugar and it can tank the immune system 5 to 12 hours. Even then the same sugar that's in one glass of orange juice, yeah, we think of, oh, oranges, vitamin C, don't I need that right now? But orange juice, which is not eating the orange itself, has so much sugar in it. And then the next thing is starving yourself. So some people, they have deficiencies. Now, sometimes those deficiencies are coming because people are eating empty calories. They're eating foods that have caloric value to them, but there's no nutrients in them. And so your body thinks, I'm starving. I'm not getting the nutrients that I need. And so you keep eating more and more and more, and you're not feeling satisfied. This is different from fasting. Fasting is where you're intentionally either intermittent fasting, where you are compressing the hours that you eat each day so that you have a longer time during a 24-hour cycle that you're not eating than when you are eating. So fasting is intentionally and actually a way to purge the body of some of the debris that is built up and give the digestive system a rest. And that can be very useful for your immune system as well. So what do we need to start doing? Hydration. Yeah, remember that our body needs fluids to move things around. We need to have enough fluid for our blood to move around, for our lymphatic system to move around. And every reaction in the body basically needs to have the water for things to move in. If we don't hydrate and put enough fluid in, our body has to figure out a way to create more. And so it creates mucus. So if you're dehydrated, you actually will create more mucus as the body's plan B to move stuff around. So that's a really important piece to recognize. And certain diet styles, if you eat a lot of carbs, and I mean the refined carbs, breads, pastas, that kind of thing, you're going to need a lot more water to reconcile that. Whereas if your carbs are coming from fresh fruits and vegetables, they oftentimes have a lot of hydration as part of that fresh fruit and vegetable. The paleo diet is another tool that people can use simply because we think of it as a genetically congruent diet style. And so there's more detail to that, but if you are searching for paleo context, you can learn more about it that way. But I'm going to give you an example of it in just a moment, what a paleo correct diet would look like. But I also want to recognize the Weston A. Price Foundation and their look at ancient diets and how people did not have struggling with their immune system in ancient traditions when they were eating their traditional foods. But when those ancient cultures or indigenous cultures, when they moved away from what their ancient diets were and they started to get processed foods in, that was when they started to get chronic illness. And so I love Weston A. Price Foundation. They're such a great resource for really learning the fundamentals of diet style. And they include things that are not in a paleo diet, but if they're not in that paleo diet, they are in a form that is still highly digestible for our bodies. I'm going to show you that in a moment. And then supplementation is another part of diet style. We're going to look at that in a moment as well. So a paleo correct diet is simply going to be unlimited vegetables, abundant, lean, natural meats. Wild caught is best, or grass-fed, or pastured, or free range. And then also some fruits, nuts, and seeds, and limiting starches and no sugar. That's the idea of the paleo correct diet. For Weston A. Price, they would include grains that would not necessarily be in a paleo diet, but those grains would be processed in a way that makes them more digestible. So sourdough bread, for example, or the masa for the corn that would have been made in the traditional way. Soaking, sprouting, fermenting these grains are what make them more digestible, so we can get the value of the nutrients that are in them. Now, supplementation. So let's go through this. These are some of my favorite things. And I realized in talking to a patient tonight, this very night, there's something I left off this list, so you'll have to just jot it down for yourself. I'll include that at the end. So supplementation, vitamin A, so important for the immune system. Vitamin C and liposomal vitamin C seems to be more valuable when you are feeling like your immune system is challenged. Vitamin D and K also so important. In fact, vitamin D got the Nobel Prize, not for strong bones, but it got the Nobel Prize because the innate immune response is controlled by vitamin D. And so we want to get vitamin D from the sun, but this time of the year, we're not getting it from the sun. And so we want to make sure that we supplement well with vitamin D. And vitamin K works together with vitamin D, so it works in the optimized way. Magnesium also so important. And oh, by the way, the vitamin C, it turns out that the less carbs that you eat, the less vitamin C you will need. But if you eat a lot of carbs, you're going to need a lot more vitamin C. Again, this time of the year, we've come out of the holiday season. There's an awful lot of carbs that show up in the holiday season. Magnesium. Magnesium also so important for the immune system. Selenium, very important. Zinc, quercetin. Some of you might have heard some of these things coming up in the last 5 or 6 years, more in your awareness. And then there's probiotics. Now with probiotics, sure, that helps us to get a healthy, robust gut, but we can also eat foods that are high in probiotic strains like kombucha, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, apple cider vinegar, those kinds of things. But also, the probiotics are the actual bacteria that are the healthy bacteria that go in, but they need to be fed. So a prebiotic is the food for a probiotic. And so prebiotics, a lot of that is fiber, soluble and insoluble fiber. They feed different strains of the healthy bacteria in the gut, the microbiome. Fish oil also is such an antidote to inflammation in our culture. That's a good one. Cod liver oil has the vitamin D right in it, along with the omega-3s. Iodine is also so important for the immune system and for the gut because 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. And Ion Biome is a product that actually helps to restore leaky gut. It helps to restore the tight junctions. If you are struggling or suspect you have leaky gut, very powerful nutrient. And then I always go to Conjuplex and Andrographis when there is kind of that upper respiratory type of immune challenge. Conjuplex and Andrographis. And my patient that came in this evening, she said, "Yeah, got a little cold. I was just away from traveling for 9 days, and I felt it right before I left. And I just stayed strong with my Conjuplex and Andrographis, and I got all the way through, and I'm just getting the symptoms now." Now, she also said that this other product that I don't have here that I'm going to tell you right now, it's WO oil, WO oil. It's from Systemic Formulas. And that is something that my mentor told me long ago. He said, if I was stuck on a desert island somewhere and I could only have one like supplement or natural remedy, he says it would be WO oil, WO oil, because it is a Chinese healing oil. And she said she used it by just putting a dab inside the back of her throat. That was like magic, she said. So I oftentimes recommend that. You can also use it just to keep the sinuses open. You can use it on achy muscles, that kind of thing as well. All right. And so this is what some of the research was showing us during this time, the last 4 or 5 years, the nutrition that can help with COVID-19. But again, it's a lot of the upper respiratory kinds of concerns that we might encounter as well. So, for example, the vitamin C, the vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, selenium, they all have antiviral properties to them. Here we have this study that showed vitamin D played a very important role with COVID mortality rates. They found that the elderly nursing home residents that had high vitamin D levels within a month prior to or within a week after an outbreak, they actually had significantly lower mortality rates. And using quercetin to improve zinc uptake was another thing that was promoted. Here's another one that just shows the importance of the gut microbiota. The composition reflected disease severity. And so this, I think just, again, it's just having a healthy gut is so important. And so now we get to movement. So sedentary lifestyle, macro traumas and micro traumas. We're going to look at this right now. Just recognize that when we think of macro traumas, it's slips or falls that we might take. So there's ice up here in the Northeast. And this year there was ice and snow in a lot of the country. So we might have slips or falls. There might be car accidents, skiing injuries, sports injuries, even work accidents. So these are the ones that obviously are going to stress and damage the body. But actually, there's a bigger risk in modern life. And the real culprit behind so much of the health issues that people have is the micro trauma. So let's talk more about the small stuff here. And so it just seems like just a little thing, but this poor posture, it's one of the most serious health threats of the modern world because it's been normalized. Because when we have all of these stresses, physical stresses, mental, emotional stresses, chemical stresses, and even the micro versions of these stresses, they all accumulate and they lead to something that's called subluxation, misalignment of the joints in the spine that causes soft tissue damage. That leads to inflammation or nerve irritation. And then that leads to spasming of the muscles around that joint to strap that joint down so that it no longer is irritating the nerve. And that causes a joint fixation. But when that happens and things get locked up, then the body starts to go into higher stress hormone production. So you actually will flood the body with cortisol, which will then alter immune function. And the spine is our suit of armor. So remember we talked about the 4 areas of impact on your health, and one of them is the one that controls your health. So your spine is your lifeline. And we have a skull that is a helmet that protects our brain, and we have the spinal column, which is the suit of armor that protects our spinal cord. And if we look at the human nervous system and we look at the spinal cord, we see branching off of the spinal cord, carrying the messages from the brain down the spinal cord, out through the nerves. They go to every cell in the body. So all of your muscles and your bones, down to your fingers and toes, but also to all of your organs. And we have two sides of the autonomic nervous system. We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. And so all those organs are controlled by the nerves that come out of the middle of your spine, right through here. You can see them coming out right here. And we talked about sympathetic response, that the adaptive physiology of stress mode is a sympathetic state. It means that the sympathetic nervous system is ramping up to control the organs. The parasympathetic is the rest and the digest, the healing, sleeping. We go into parasympathetic dominance at that time. And you can see that control comes out of the top of the neck and the bottom of the spine. And so if people have subluxations in their nervous system, in their spine, misalignments, that can start to interfere with the brain's ability to control these organs. And if those are if the subluxation is where the immune system organs are, then that can actually start to affect the immune system. Now, a lot of times, as we said, we talked about how people talk about how they feel around health, sickness and health. And that if they feel sick, then that's when they're sick. But if they don't feel sick, then they thought they were healthy, but actually they were just not sick. So if we look at the nervous system and we look at the feeling versus function, the sensory nerves that feel pain, that feel discomfort, that run our posture, that feel temperature, that's just the part that feels pain is only 7% of the nervous system. The other 93% of the nervous system is running things. It's running the muscles and it's running the organs. But less than 10% of your nerves actually sense pain. So you can have subluxations, misalignments that are disturbing nerve function and affecting the function in your body and not necessarily have any pain at all. And that's important to recognize, that the subluxations can be silent. But when you have the subluxations, it will ramp up that stress response and put us into that sympathetic state, which is what then causes the immune system to downregulate. So stress is kryptonite to us. Remember that. It creates weakness. Stress creates weakness. And so what do we need to start doing here? Again, think about your action steps here. Burst exertion exercise. Burst exertion is the most important way to exercise. So you want to actually get panting, sweating in, not just going on the same walk you do over and over, and you do it so much, so often that your body's completely adapted to it, so you never even break a sweat. You can have a conversation the whole way, no panting. Really burst exertion exercise for not even that long. Even just 20 minutes 3 times a week is enough to actually help to keep the immune system strong. Ergonomics is also important. So paying attention to your posture so you can protect your spine when you are moving or when you're not moving, when you're sedentary, having a good posture when you do have to sit. And then making sure that you are getting your spine checked for subluxations, because that might be interfering with your immune response and it might lead to you being immunocompromised. Here's one study that showed the impact of fitness versus fatness in COVID-19. They definitely found, again, that the current state of physical inactivity and COVID-19 is a tale of 2 pandemics. The people that were sedentary had worse outcomes than the people that were fit. Whoops, yeah, and the study actually shows that 17% lower risk of hospitalization if you were fit. Whoops, here it is again, the next part. And so healthy living for a pandemic event protection, HL-pivot, I love that. That overreaching goals to improve global health and to protect individuals from the risks associated with chronic disease and viral infections. Okay. So let's just teach you right now something you can start to do that's great for your spine. And that is this exercise. It's called life extension exercises. And you're going to do 20 seconds in each position, and you do one round for every 2 hours of sitting. So here's how it goes. Y is when you're putting your arms right up in a Y shape. You're going to stretch those fingers out into the universe as far as you can, stretching up. And you want the arms to be as close to your ears, the plane of your body, as possible. So not out in front, but right up overhead. That's the Y, and you do that again about 20 seconds. The W is trying to put your elbows into your back pocket. So pushing them out behind you and doing that for 20 seconds. The L is when we then have our elbows crooked 90 degrees at our elbows, but making sure our hand is back behind us as far as we can. Not necessarily behind us, but out wide enough so that if you were looking straight ahead at the horizon, you would not be able to see in your peripheral vision if you wiggled your fingers. And then the T is just stretching your both arms out to the side, again, back so that you wiggle your fingers and you can't see them in your periphery. Now, of course, if you have shoulder trouble, that kind of thing, you have to modify this, but that's what you want to work towards. All right, the life extension exercises. Now, then there's this curious example of Masha and Dasha. And I just love this story because it really tells us so much about our amazing design of our body and our immune system. And so Masha and Dasha were Siamese twins. They were joined at the hip. And because their circulatory systems were interconnected, the twins shared each other's blood. So their bloodstream was shared. And therefore, a bacteria or a virus that entered one twin's bloodstream would soon be seen in the blood of her sister. And yet, surprisingly, illness affected them differently. Dasha was more bent over to the side and more prone to colds. Masha had a healthier constitution. So the thing that was curious, that was a mystery, is when one of them became ill with a childhood disease like measles, the other one did not. The measles bug was in both of their bodies, in their collective bloodstream, but they didn't both get the measles. So, how do we explain that? They did have shared a blood supply, but they had separate nervous systems, they had separate spines. And one of them was a little bit more bent over to the side. Do you think that they could have been more subluxated? That the sister that was more bent over, Dasha, that she may have been more subluxated, more compromised in her nervous system. Although Masha and Dasha had common circulatory, digestive, excretory, lymphatic, hormonal, and lymphatic systems, they were joined at the hips. They had separate spinal columns and spinal cords. So this extraordinary situation has given us invaluable examples that confirm that there's much more to catching a disease than simply breathing in germs. Germs can make you sick if and only if your body provides them fertile ground to grow in. And so the state of your nervous system can determine whether you have high or low resistance to disease. If you're suffering from disease, that can the health of your nervous system will play a decisive role in whether or not and how rapidly you will recover. Keeping your spinal column and nervous system free from subluxation stress, chiropractic care keeps you in a higher state of health. People who get regularly adjusted often find they get infections and other illnesses less often. And when they do, they need to exercise their immune system. They seem to get over it much more quickly and with less pain and suffering than they used to. So I love that story of Masha and Dasha. Here's some examples of my patients and the experiences that they have had. So, for example, I want to tell you the story of Elaine. So Elaine, she had March of 2016, she started care and she had headaches and neck pain. And she had chronic sinus infections as well, allergies, asthma, and eczema. Each year, she was better as she was under care because she was making more lifestyle changes and her nervous system was getting healthier. And then in 2018, she suddenly got this idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura, but it normalized within a few months and remained stable. And the doctors were very surprised by that. In 2019, she said her sinuses were the clearest they have ever been. Well, that was good timing for her. She had the best pollen season ever. She was able to do yard work and housework with plenty of stamina. And in February of 2020, she was breathing the best she had ever been. I get that in there funny. The breathing was the best it had been ever. And that was February of 2020. So she could have gone into COVID being one of the weak, but instead she was robust and strong going into COVID. And so her outcomes, of course, were different. I have seniors that report that they actually are going right through, let's bring this out of the way here. No colds or flu, even with lots of travel, and no more allergies either. So, robust superpowers. So, how do you know if you have a subluxation? Well, you need to get checked. And so, how do we do that? We use motion palpation. We use feeling, is there any locking down of the joints in the spine because of them being strapped down, which is what happens with subluxations. We do static palpation, actually just feeling, is there a misalignment in the vertebrae? We look at posture because we know poor posture is going to come along with subluxations. And we'll use X-ray as well to just look at what the bones are doing, and it tells us how long the subluxations have been there. And we use instrumentation. And so when we look at the instrumentation piece here, these are thermal scans, and they measure how the nervous system is affecting the organs, the tissues, and the circulation in your body. So on the left-hand side, this would be a healthy normal. On the right, we see color showing up because this is where there's inflammation and where there may be indications of subluxations. We also know that when we see this big one-sided pattern, that it actually oftentimes is a big upper cervical pattern at the top of the spine that is disturbed, that's skewing everything that comes down. And so that's one kind of instrumentation that we use. This one particularly is measuring the nerve supply to the organs, blood vessels, and glands. So if you look at that map of the nervous system that we had on an earlier slide, we know where these nerves are going. So if you remember, the part in the middle, this is where the sympathetic nerves come out to control the organs. Down the bottom, this would be the parasympathetic down here. And so then there are other ways that we would be measuring function. We look at the nerve supply to the muscles. We look at how well you're managing the current stresses that you're under, how well the body is tracking where the body is in space. So if you do have vertebral subluxations, what do you need to do to correct them? And so if you're curious, first of all, whether or not you have them, then we would recommend that you come and get checked. And remember that, the only way you'll know is by having a chiropractor check you. Chiropractors are the only professionals that know how to locate, analyze, and correct vertebral subluxations. Now, remember that and if you are curious, then at the end, I'll give you a slide where it'll give our text number, and then you can text us and let us know, and we're happy to set up a time to meet with you. So remember I said that there were the three things that are the reason why we have such a weak community and country. And it's because of procrastination. Like people, even if they know what they should do, they know they should get better sleep, they know that they should deal with stress better, think better, healthier thoughts, they know they should change their diet, and they just haven't gotten to it. Oh, it's the holidays, maybe New Year's resolution. Yeah, day 18 of the new year is when everybody stops their resolutions, it turns out, the research shows. So procrastination is the thief of health. And so I want you to take action. Think about the things that you need to do that can get you back on track. And I promise you, if in the next 21 days you were to implement these strategies, remember it takes at least 21 days to establish a habit. So 21 days to do these things and to start to set them into habits for yourself. then you're going to see a change in your immune system. And so finally, I want you to think about, well, who do you know? If you're already under care yourself, who do you know that needs to get their spine checked, that wants a more robust and healthier immune system? And if you're not getting checked, then please feel free to reach out to us. Because when we think about sickness, there's a family that had a tradition, and their tradition was whoever's birthday it was, however many years old they were, that's the number of candles they would get, and that's how many wishes they would get as well. And so there was one year where the father was 40 years old and he had 40 things that he was wishing for. And then when he was 41 years old, he only had one wish because he had gotten cancer in that year. And his only wish was to have his health back. And so when you have your health, you have many wishes. When you lose your health, you have just one. So my goal for you and your family is to have as many wishes as possible. And so if there's anybody that you know that is struggling, please share this with them. Let us know if you want to get a link to the recording. And if you yourself or someone in your family wants to get checked, then we invite you. Please just send us a text to our phone number is 802-985-9850, and just send the text bulletproof and we'll know what you mean. And we'll connect with you. We'll get you into our schedule so we can check to see if we can help you get that robust immune system that you want. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I'm going to stop share right now, and I'm going to stop the recording.